Good to see you again. We worked really hard to get here.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot. Just getting the video to work. I love it. So, we'll get right down to it. So, we got here because you saw another video of mine that, thank God I had a production team to do it. It turned out really well, thanks to them. We can't let me do anything on my own. So yeah, how did we get here? I mean, you and I met through Battleforge Nation a few years back, but
Yep.
we're gonna start with you saw Mason's video, and then we'll backtrack and bring ourselves to the present from there.
So I got the notification on my phone that you had done, your interview with Mason, and you did the had it posted up, and I went back to watch it as I was driving. I was like, let me get home first and then watch. So I got back to the house and started watching it, and that's when it kind of, started resonating with me, and where I had been and what I had done, what I dealt with, um, and kind of came full circle with me. So that I was like, well, I've got to get a hold of you first of all, because I knew that you would understand perspective, um, especially given the fact we both served, and then being able to just get my voice out, because doing it on my own, it was kind of like how, what, where, when, what steps, and so, and you had already had your development into your story, but then also with Mason's story, and I was like, okay, I got to do something.
Yeah, no, that's great. And getting started is often the hardest part. And so that's what Amy Hines Real Talk is about. It is, for me, it was very healing to just start telling my story. And it started with me telling my story in a prison. And, it kind of has evolved from there. And, to me, we live in a culture right now where people don't know how to relate to one another. It's either religion or politics, and it's polarized. It's trying to figure out, what camp are
Yeah.
you in, so I can figure out how to dismiss you before I
Yeah.
even know you. And that is not serving us. That's not serving us.
No.
And, us going into service, I think we both went in for very similar reasons. We went in because we really wanted to serve, and we really wanted to do something noble. And in some ways too, it was a way out. It was a path out of the life that we had known. But then it evolved from there. It evolved into something where, like, you become family with these people, and it
Yep.
becomes, and you said it best, it is about the person to your left and to your right.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter race, color, creed, religion, any of it. None of that stuff matters, because you are looking out for that person. And,
Yeah.
when I got out, that was a broken piece for me that was so hard. And so this has been my way of trying to recapture that and heal some broken pieces in my world. BFN, Battleforge Nation, that we were in, helped
Yep.
with some of that. And it helped
Oh,
you as
tremendously.
well, that giving back kind of on the other side of some of the things that we went through, which we'll talk through for the people watching. But that's what Amy Hines Real Talk is about, is to find that humanity, and to find our story, and to find our voice, and to understand why that matters. For me, it's been healing, and you've determined for yourself, and some of the conversations that we've already had, that it's very healing for you, and hopefully it'll be
Tremendously.
healing for other people. So yeah, so let's get started and tell a little bit, just a brief background. Walk us through going into service, time in service, and then we'll talk about what it was like on the other side of that.
So going in, graduated 2001, prior to 9/11. Uh, Big influence in my life was my grandfather, and his credo was, before you do anything, go serve. I don't care if it's 3 years, four
Mm.
years, 6 years, whatever. Just at least do that for yourself, so that
Yeah.
you can adapt and grow upon yourself, and follow your dreams after that. I'm like, okay, kind of dismissed it, and then 9/11 happened. Obviously, that was a big event for everybody. So I answered the call. I went initially. It was a lot to do with family, and then 9/11, and so I took off for Fort Benning, Georgia, in January of 2002, and
For the
went
Army.
in, yeah, for the Army. And uh, in the process of all that, just I flat out told myself, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to go full steam ahead. So I went infantry. I had no uh, misconceptions of joining anything but the infantry. So I ran headfirst straight into it. Obviously, the recruiter was like, "No, don't, big mistake, don't,
Right.
backtrack a little bit, pump the brakes before you get too deep." And for me,
You don't want to
there
be
was
in the
no,
rear with the gear? That's
yeah,
not
no,
you don't want
no,
to be in the rear with the gear? Oh
no.
man.
So, but at the same time, my mindset was I knew what was coming. So,
Right.
I mean, obviously there was going to be a deployment or two involved, and contingent on where in the world you're going to go, it's going to happen regardless. So
Right.
my mindset behind that also wasn't only that, but it was also the fact that, you know, I was filling a spot that somebody else didn't have to fill. And it was more of that for me than anything. And then obviously you get into, basic AIT and stuff like that, go through, unassigned 11X, become a Charlie, Mortarman. So then from there, it was completing AIT, going through all the 11 Charlie stuff, and getting to Campbell. Assigned, it was my dream. That's where I wanted to be. I didn't want to be anywhere else.
Yeah.
That's where I wanted to go. That for me was the end all be all. So that's what I did. And I get there, and of course retention's like, we have enough 11 Charlies. You're going to be a ground and pounder 11 Bravo. So get used to it and have fun. I'm like, well, shit. No experience,
Right.
and then
Happy to help, but can I get some training, please? Like,
yeah. So I mean, obviously, I had the small, 1 to 2 day, CQB stuff at Benning for basic, but that was minuscule compared to AIT.
yeah.
So it was kind of like, you're gonna sink or swim, just deal with it. And obviously, I was kind of, asking for floaties and trying to keep above the water line. So I struggled with it a little bit, but then it really came down to just the training, repetition, and then getting into combat. Like once you know you get to over there, it's surreal. It's eye opener. It's
Yeah.
uh
Game on.
a
And you went to
yeah.
Afghanistan, right?
No, Iraq.
Or you were in
Iraq.
Iraq. Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
We were there for the kickoff, the initial invasion, and I mean, obviously, it was, like I said, it was too real. You step out, and once you step out of the plane, it's before you even, they open the doors up, and the doors come flying open, and everybody's standing up, getting a single file line to walk out. You can feel just that, that moisture, just air, everything, just dehydration almost instantly, just from the heat of being in Kuwait. Um, and then from there is, you know, going from Kuwait to Camp PA, and being at Camp PA was another eye opener because we were dealing with Scuds getting launched, um, having the Patriot missile systems pop stuff out of the sky every other day or so or whatever,
Yep.
and then having the Camp PA attack, grenades thrown in the command tent, guys getting screwed up, one was killed, Captain Seifert, and that being just a few tents down from us, and it was like, oh shit, like we thought they were coming south on us, like they already knew where we were at, they were coming for us, and we just popped on and got ready, like we're gonna do it, you um so yeah, it was up to that point was definitely it was an eye opener big time,
Mm-hmm.
and having to quickly adjust and adapt your headset to you're not back home. You have to focus into what's really sinking into the situation and what's
Yeah.
coming ahead of this.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
then from there, so you were 11 Bravo, so you were infantry, but then you got assigned to be a radio operator
yeah,
at HQ, yeah. So
yeah,
so
um
and that's kind of where we're going with this is you had a voice, and your voice was more significant, I think, than most in this. 'Cause your voice
yeah.
is very literally meaningful, and so we're gonna talk about what that looks like on the other side. So
So going into change of command, I think it was in June. I want to say it was between May and June of '03. All new staff. So, we got guys leaving, guys coming in, and obviously I'm one of the new guys going up to battalion. You're going to be a radio operator and you're going to be a 240 gunner. Have at it and enjoy it.
right,
So being thrown
good
into
luck.
yeah, you're getting thrown into the deep end again because you have no clue of like I had no clue of how to operate the radio other than you squeeze the button and you talk because somebody else already took care of that, you know.
Yes.
Um, so getting thrown into that mix, it was kind of chaotic because not knowing how to program the radio, not knowing how to change out certain things or fix certain things to make the radio operate like it should when need be or what have you. So it was definitely learn the steps, learn the processes quick, or
Yeah.
you're going to be in trouble. So it became more of a learning curve because it was like the first day was I was scared to death. Oh my god, I was scared to death. I was honestly afraid. Like you see the
Yeah.
movies where guys screwing up a radio call and it gets somebody hurt or something, and it's like
Yep.
that was my mindset. Like I don't want to screw this up. Um, and
Me
then
too. The
after,
radio's always intimidated me a little bit. Like,
yeah,
oh, I don't want to be that
well,
person. Yeah.
so we were attached to the 50 Deuce, and we were covering a sector. They had one half of the river, we had the other half of the river, and our sector was the same size as what three battalions were covering on the other side of the river. So it was huge. And there's a lot of moving parts and resources that we had to track and make sure people were on the right routes, doing the right things, and stuff of that nature. And it come down to 3 to 4, maybe 5 weeks in, I settled down enough to where I was comfortable with everything. I was able to register what was going on, track, and it was a learning curve, not only in the sense of what their missions were or what my job was, but also what the operational aspect is for the entire unit. Is the entire battalion, the battalion commander or the S3 says, well, we're going to do this or we're going to do this. And you're learning all the little intricacies from, the highest part of our command structure down to the lowest guy in the totem pole. And that's a broad spectrum, when you look at everything as a whole. That's a lot of moving parts. And
Right.
so I learned and adapt really quick, being especially with, our setup was, you're on 12, you're off 12, you're on 12, and it was 7 days a week,
Yeah.
for the entire tour.
And it's not just one radio. It's, you got
Yeah,
like 8 or 9 radios going.
yeah. So we had one radio for every company, and then we had separate radio set up for the 502nd Command Structure. We had one for our brigade. So we were monitoring division level, brigade level, multiple brigades, and then our own stuff on top of that, and dealing with outposts, OPs, um, checkpoints, all that stuff. And you got 5 radios going off at once, and you're kind of, we call it, like, we actually called it the octopussy. No offense, but that
Yeah.
just because
Yeah.
of all
That's
the tangled
absolutely.
mess. So and it was just
I miss
some
service.
days some days were better than others, obviously. I mean, you would have your really slow days when we weren't really doing a whole lot, and then there's days
Yeah.
where it was just bam, bam,
Oh,
bam, 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 constantly.
overstimulation. Yeah, that's a
Oh
lot.
yeah, and like I said, you got two guys operating these radios, and even two guys, two hands, that's only 4 radios, and you're still dealing with a squawk box plus all the other radios going on at the same time. And it's just to a point, it could be a sensory overload. So you're constantly
Yes.
like trying to get away for a minute just to catch your head and then come back into the fray of the chaos. And
Yeah.
the mindset is just it's leave it blank. Just
Yeah.
drop whatever's going on, regardless of what's going on at home, what's going on outside the gate. Drop it, let everything go, and just focus on the saturation of calls coming in and repeatedly going through and through and through. And it you know we had multiple incidents where guys got hurt. Hear that stuff, guys, screaming on the radio. He needs help. We need medics. We need this. We need that. Um, Especially when it came to uh, 7th November of '03, we lost a lot of guys got hurt, and we lost one of our guys that I served with personally. In my company. Be it they were in a different platoon. There was guys there that I knew names of, hung out with back in the barracks, bar hopped with them. We did a stint in West Point before our tour in Iraq, and I was up there with them, getting to know all these guys personally. And buddy of mine down in Texas, Butcher, Charles Butcher. Him and I hung out a lot, and I know he was I think he was injured. I can't remember for sure 100%, but it just knowing that whole group of guys, you know, got injured, it waned on me heavily. Shit, just piling
And this
on.
is stuff, yeah. I mean, you're getting, not only are you overstimulated with all of these things, with all of the radio calls, but it's not like you're just, people are calling in to order pizza. That is
Oh
not
yeah,
what's
yeah,
happening here. I mean, this is wartime stuff. These are real. I mean, this is life and death decisions,
yeah,
and your voice is now associated with orders that are being given to you. These are
yeah,
not Randall's opinions. These are not what Randall would even necessarily choose to do. This is what Randall's being told. You
yeah,
need to communicate this. And there's no, hey, could you please? Like, there's no explaining
yeah.
it. It is
It,
execute, execute, execute.
it was a standing operating procedure. It was orders handed down to us.
Right.
This is our strict guideline. This is how we're going to react to this situation or this situation or this situation. You're going to, aggressively do what you have to do, and you're not going to back down. You're not going to back off. You're going to stay in the fight until you're
Correct.
told to, sit back and we'll deal with it.
Mhm.
And so there was multiple incidents. Another incident, grenade attack off the top of a bridge, and grenade hit and blew one of our guys up pretty bad, banged him up. Pretty sure he became a triple amputee. Um, and I'm on the radio listening to this. I can hear, you know, the NCO in charge of the chalk, for the trucks, and he's talking over the radio, bitching and barking orders at me, and I'm sitting here telling him, no, you need to redirect yourself and get back in the fight. You got a guy hurt. We will take care of him, but ultimately this is the mission. This is what you're supposed to do. And at the same time, I'm still hearing, over this guy, NCO talking to me. I can hear the guy in the background screaming, you know, bloody fucking murder. He's hurt. And for me, it was like, fuck, here's another one. And over a period of time, I mean, it got to the point where I don't know if it was the battalion commander. I don't know if it was the S3. I don't know who it was. Um, but I remember I had stepped out back and I was smoking out back behind the talk. Our building had a huge, I think it was a 15 to 20 foot wall behind our talk. And there was only a narrow gap of maybe 15 to 20 foot from the wall to the other wall, behind the building. And I was out the back smoking. I walked in and I forgot something. I went to turn to walk back out the door. And somebody in the talk yelled for me to stop, and they were asking me about something. And then we get hit with mortars. And obviously, during the attack, we, you know, do what we got to do, make sure everybody's safe, try to get the best cover you can. They didn't penetrate our buildings or anything like that. Thank God. Our building was pretty freaking stout, but I went back to that door. I pulled that door open, and I don't think I even mentioned this to you before this. I opened the door, and the shrapnel was littered in the door frame and the door itself because it was a solid wooden door. So for me, it was like
You were
elation
just
that I,
standing there. Yeah,
yeah. So for me, it was like if they, whoever they was, because I don't recall who it was that said something. I just heard my name and I turned around, and that's all it was. And then I go back out the door after everything's said and done, and I feel that shrapnel on the door. I'm like, well, shit. 5 seconds is all it took, you know,
hmm
and I would be 6 feet down or standing here now. You know what I mean? And it finally came down to, I think it was, I want to say it was the battalion commander, Colonel Carlson. I'm not 100% for sure, but somebody had told, some of the NCOs and stuff like that, I was like, this guy needs a fucking break. Get him out of here. So
yeah.
they sent me to the hook. I was in the hook for 4 days. Came back, I was kind of refreshed, and then it was right back into the fray, dealing with chaos and dealing with, you know, and it wasn't, I wasn't the only one doing it. There were three other guys up there with me,
Sure.
but it still, it came down to a lot of them most of the time would recognize my voice just because I was associated with a lot of stuff. Um, and the
Hey, you
most,
were the
you know,
voice in their headset during some of the worst times of their lives or their buddies'
well,
lives. Or Hard stuff.
Some of the worst times, yes, but the one big major positive incident, and that was Operation Tapeworm in 2003, July. We took down Saddam's two sons,
Mm.
northern Iraq, and we I set in on the mission planning. I think I went 3 days without sleep because I set in the mission plan the night before, on top of manning radios and working with the S3 and the NCOs and the battalion commander on working out the operational spectrum of how everything's going to play out. And by that same time the next night, we were doing a net call. I was on the radio, and there's a video somewhere I've seen somebody recorded it, and I'm sitting back in my little nook, and I'm on the radio telling them, this is a net call. Everybody that's got ears on the radio needs to hear this, including, command, first sergeants,
Yeah.
platoon sergeants, everybody. Get them on, on the radio so they can hear this. And
High
that's when,
visibility mission. Yeah.
yeah. So
You
when
guys
that
nailed
came
it though.
down, yeah, This, uh, I think this was Sanchez who came out publicly and announced it to the world that we had taken them out, and that's right after that was put out by Sanchez. We were doing the net call to, everybody, and it was our air support guys, our special forces guys that were there with us, and our guys, just getting the net call out there and saying, hey, we fucking did it, that kind of thing. So that was a positive. It wasn't a negative to me, and that was a high point for being over there. And
Yeah.
the the high points, obviously it's kind of a fluctuation of oil and water. It's got its moments you have to figure out, your balance and things. But a lot of it, for me, I don't want to say it was negative, but it had negative effects on me personally, emotionally, and mentally. And like you said, coming back into the spectrum of coming home and you know getting that notice, you're heading home. I had less than 20 minutes notice on a flight where we were split up in multiple groups to come back home, and I had no time to call family. You know, phone service over there was spotty at best, being satellite. You don't know if you're going to get through or not, and then the time frame between there and home was huge. And
Right.
that's kind of like where things kind of just the later half of the tour from probably December to February, right when we came back, it was just don't give a shit, don't care, you know.
You
Um,
start to dissociate, and you start to lose your humanity, and you start to lose yourself in it, because you see, what people can do to each other
yeah,
is absolutely devastating. And so this set you on a path. This set you up for when you came back home, and it was very isolating. It was very sudden, and there was really nobody to greet you. And so it's kind of this shock. And some of what we hear from a lot of the ones that during our time frame, but even back in Vietnam, it's very similar. You come home and you just feel like you're on another planet, and
yeah,
finding people to relate to. So you went through all this. Now, before we switch to that piece, something that you had said before when we've talked is, you had talked to guys that you'd never met before in person while you
yeah,
were across the pond, and they would recognize you by your voice,
yeah.
and
There were
that kind of
several
stuck with
occasions.
you.
Yeah, there were several occasions where we would go in groups. Obviously outside of Post or down in Nashville because we were so close. We were only 40 minutes from Nashville. And we would get down to these bars and we would bar hop, go from place to place to place. Obviously like guys always do. Um, get down there and you start bumping into guys, and they're like, you're so and so. I know your voice. They would instantly recognize that voice. And like, you were, Battleforce main, weren't you? Yeah, I was the radio operator. Get on the plane, take the flight, get back to Campbell, land in Campbell, and uh, a captain, and I can't remember his name, but he was with us in Iraq for a little while, and then Colonel Carlson told him, he said, "You're going to go back and greet the guys when I get home. I want you back there. I want you, boots shine, uniforms, starched, good to go. Make sure that every guy that comes home is greeted. If they don't have any family there, I don't care. You're going to be there." And he was the first person once, we did all of our parading and stuff, and they dismissed us from our group. He was the first person in the crowd that I saw. He walked over to me and said, "Welcome home." And that was, the most heartwarming and touch felt thing for me, because I had no one. I didn't have the chance to, call back and say, "Hey, come down here and visit," or anything like that. So for me, that was my welcome home. It's like, here I am, you know.
Yeah, because
Um,
you're watching all these other people go and meet their the ones
oh
that
yeah,
had more of a heads up, and so that's
yeah,
very isolating. So immediately getting off the plane,
yeah,
it's and then you're thrust into this immediately feeling. I mean, for him to be there was wonderful, but the
yeah.
isolation and the loneliness and it set in pretty hard for you.
Oh yeah. Um, like I said, we landed. He was there. We were kind of left to our own devices. We're like, "You guys got 4 days. 4 days. You have from today, which we landed. It was actually a Friday morning. We had from that Friday to that Monday free. All they had to do was assign rooms. So we got our assigned rooms, and instantly it was, first rule was, no drinking and driving. Second rule was no driving. Third rule was no driving.
Yeah,
So they definitely didn't want us doing anything like that. So it was a matter of, trying to figure out a way to get off post, because we didn't want to be stuck on post and confined. It felt like, we were still overseas and in that little box, no room to breathe. And so my
yeah.
buddy called up a friend of his, and we took off and hit Nashville. And I honestly think we started drinking at like 7 that morning and didn't stop until about 6:30 the next morning. It was just a bum rush of beer,
Yeah.
drinks, and that kind of was the start of a downturn for me, because then I got the taste for it and it was like, I can handle it. I went 24 hours straight drinking. I mean, I can pretty much handle anything at this point. So I'm invisible. Fuck it.
Right.
Um, and that kind of followed me along my path from, the time I got home to the time I got out.
Like from there,
Yeah.
it kind of
Um,
that set the stage for
yeah.
leading up towards how we met through Battleforge Nation.
I had from 2006 to 2009, I had 13 different jobs. No joke. Bouncing from place to place to place. Um,
Now, and you had
getting it.
mentioned to me too, part of one of the things that came up in all of that was people asking you if you had PTSD and
Yeah.
you not being able to get jobs just based on feeling like you were being disqualified for that. And
I
you
yeah.
really
So
battled through.
I contacted a barge company, because they had previously, like right before 9/11, I had submitted an application with this company, and they're very well known. Um, the company called me ironically right before it was after I signed my contract, but it was before I went to basic, and they're like, "Well, we got a job for you." Uh, Sorry guys, I got something else. I'll come back when I get done. That kind of thing. So obviously I go through, 3 years in the service, come home, and I'm like, well, they were there before, let me try them again. And so I applied 4 different times through 3 different offices, and even through a personal family member who's actually works for the company. And all 3 times, it came down to the final interview, and the question was, well, we see that you're ex-military. Do you have any, you know, issues that we need to be aware of? Like, well, I'm dealing with some PTSD stuff, but it's managed. I have it under control. There's no problems. I'm medicated. It's partially medicated, but I'm dealing with it. And at that point, they were just like, pump. They hit the brakes hard.
Yep.
Immediately turned right. See you later. Bye. We're not. No, we're not gonna. You know, negotiate anymore from here. And
Yeah.
it was that way 3 different times with, multiple companies. Even on top of that, at the time I was physically and mentally capable of doing the job. I was prepared for the job, ready to do the job, and it was a deckhand, on a barge. And they just kind of, no, no, we don't want to have to deal with the PTSD stuff. We don't want you going like crazy and,
Right.
popping off or something. So
So you
for
had a
me,
number of things in here too. So you had gone through or were going through a divorce. You had a
the
daughter.
2006, my daughter being born, everything was kind of kosher. We were making progress, and you bought a house and done things that normal couples do, and everything was kosher-ish. I was still dealing with demons and issues and drinking heavily still. And then it
Drinking,
got
dealing with the job stuff,
yeah
dealing with also lack of tribe. You talked about
yeah
finding people, you came back to buddies that didn't know how to
yeah. So
relate to you and thought you were crazy.
one in particular told me to my face, like, you're nuts. That wasn't your fight. You had no reason to be there. You should have went. Just calling me crazy and stupid. And at the time, it was, you don't get to say that because you weren't there, first of all. Second of all, you don't understand the capacity at which it becomes more about the brotherhood and the family than it does about the personal parts,
Yeah.
financial stability, whatever, some people, will say, all bonus this. Well, my bonus was 4 grand for 3 years. What did he do? My buddy got the same thing for 2 years or
Yeah.
3 years, whatever. So for
You
me,
don't
it was,
really sign up for the money. I mean,
yeah,
deployments you make a little, but that's not
yeah,
motivation enough to say, I could die doing this. It's really not. And it feels
yeah,
so disrespectful when you're sitting next to somebody and you're trying to just share your story and who you are, and this is where I'm at, and I'm different than I was, and I saw some things and I heard some things, and like you said, the highs and lows, all the things. It's and they can't relate, and they're still stuck in their high school or college
yeah,
years, and they're looking at you like you're crazy, and you then feel like you have to shut down and you can't share this stuff because it's not safe. You're not only being judged, but it feels so disrespectful to
yeah,
everything that you've gone through, everything that you've seen, everything that these people that are walking around without limbs,
yeah,
how disrespectful that you don't know what you're talking about. And so it does create this sense of isolation. We've talked about
yeah.
how isolation is
And
not good. And your anger stuff you found.
so we divorced. Prior to that, my dad passed away. So I was dealing with, loss of work. At the time I was working for the state of Ohio, and governor come in and shut us down. So you're done. Your job's canceled. 6 months unemployment. You're done. Find something else. Um, to having my dad pass, and then 30 days after that, her saying, "Well, let's get divorced. I want to. I'm done." To me going into almost like a frantic state, because at that point I was like, I'm running. And I literally did just that. I packed my stuff and I left and bounced from place to place for a while. And it would seem like
You were
my
almost
brother,
homeless. Almost.
well, basically I
Got
was,
up.
because, like, so I was living on a fixed income. Had no money at all, really. I mean, obviously during the period of time after my divorce for about 6 months, I was living fine because my employment was great. I was getting over $700 a week. So I was being stupid instead of paying off my house, because I could have easily, with 6 months I could have paid it off, but I went stupid and got into drinking almost every night. Monday to Sunday to Monday, or Sunday to Friday. I would go to the bar until 7 o'clock Friday night. I wouldn't stay out past 7 on Friday night, and I wouldn't go out at all on Saturday night, just because of the routine of the local police. And then it became an issue of, you know, leaving that house because I was forcefully evicted. They were told, the people that owned it, like, you're out, you're done, you're gone, bye. And literally changed the locks on it, which is illegal. At the time I didn't know it. I was too naive. Um, to staying with a buddy of mine up in Mansfield, Ohio, to living with my brother for a little bit until I finally got back on my feet. I reached out to a organization, and they helped me get an apartment. And I lived in the apartment for a little while, and that's when my brother kind of stepped in and was like, "I want to start doing some of these odd jobs. I want you to come and help me out, and we're going to take care of some stuff and put some money in your pocket and my pocket, and we'll do what we can." I'm like, all right, whatever, that's fine. And I did that. Still, at the same time, I'm still drinking heavy, still, not taking the responsibility. I kept digging that grave deeper and deeper and deeper. And there was an incident where I scared the living shit out of my brother. He had us on a job site. We were cleaning shingles off a roof. we all agreed we were gonna make X amount of dollars per day per person. If you don't show up, your part is divvied up between the other three guys. So we had a guy that just didn't show up for 3 days, and he called us talking, "Oh, you guys are liars and thieves, and you're stealing my money and this and that." And he made a comment about my brother. My middle brother was shot when he was 12 in the head with a 22 caliber. He lived, but he still has the bullet in his brain. And this guy called and made just a snide remark about it. And all I remember is jumping off a fucking 8 foot tall roof, jumped in my truck. I grabbed my pistol, broke it down, passed it off like I was doing an EIB qualification on a fucking Beretta. I completely just disassembled it, passed it off to the guy's wife that I happened to go to school with that I was working for. Jumped in my truck, drove to the dude's house 2 blocks away, and all I remember is getting punched in the face by my brother because I apparently blacked out. I had got on the dude's porch, was trying to reach for him, and my 2 brothers and a couple other people ripped me off the porch and threw me in the back of my truck.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother kind of was like, scared the living shit out of me. From there, like I said, I then moved again just because of living conditions. It was not ideal, and my inadequacies in drinking. I uh, went ahead and moved to a small town out in the country. I was like, this is the best solution for me, temporarily, not ideally,
Right.
just to get myself some seclusion so I can get my head right. And I don't have access to the bars. I don't have access to, get to these places to indulge myself, so to speak, and burn money
Mm-hmm.
that I don't have.
Yeah, change of
So
scenery.
yeah, so I get out to this place and I'm living there for a little while, and this was probably early 2016, and it was just before I met my wife that I'm with now. My brother called me like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, and he was like, "Are you all right?" Yeah, I'm fine. I'm good as gold. I'm good. So no, seriously, I had a fucked up dream. I know you're back there with a gun, but I had a fucked up dream. You pulled the trigger and fucking blew your brains out. And I just want to know that you're okay before I leave to go to Florida for 6 months. I'm like, no, I'm good. At the time I was still kind of recouping, but in not necessarily a backward pattern, but stepping back after he made a comment and thinking about what he was saying and realizing that I had these ideas of suicide, that I had from 2012 to, and some before, mostly after 2012 up till that point. I had entertained these ideas, and I wouldn't say anything to anybody. I would sit in my room in my trailer, where I lived, and you get that dark veil of guilt over you, and you start
Mm-hmm.
contemplating these things, planning them, and it's sad to say, almost reassuring yourself of your idea
Yeah,
and how logical it sounds and how good it sounds.
it
And
does. It becomes this little nugget that we nurse, because I definitely had that time frame after my divorce. Again, these things spike when it's not just one thing. It's not like I've just had a bad day and I want to end it. No, I mean, this is progressive, right? These are a lot of things that have
yeah,
built up to this point, and I was the same, and I wasn't talking to anybody. I wasn't in any kind of counseling. You were at least in counseling, but you were still like at the VA, you're afraid to say when they ask you the question, it doesn't feel like a safe place to answer honestly, because like, oh, this is going to go on my record. It's going to be a, scarlet letter for life. I'm going to have this tattooed
yeah,
on my forehead. You guys are always going to treat me this way. And then maybe you'll put me on a 72-hour hold, which also doesn't really help my life. But I was in
yeah,
the same thing where I had this plan, and I told nobody about it. Nobody would have known. Um, but it was oddly comforting because I felt like it was
yeah,
the one thing that I could control, that if it felt like the only thing that I could control. And
yeah,
so I had an exit strategy, I guess. But yeah, and we had a very similar plan, unbeknownst to
yeah,
us.
yeah.
Um, to talk through that.
The the plan, and I had more than one. It wasn't. It was basically the same plan, but it was just multiple locations, and I knew
Yeah. Yeah.
the degree of severity of these locations and how well it would work. Like that was how
Yep.
fucked up my head was. Like this is perfect. Like
Yep.
absolutely like it would look like an accident. Nobody would be none the wiser because I didn't want to go and leave a damn blood trail that would blow my brains out. I didn't want to make a mess for somebody and traumatize
Yeah.
them. If I'm going to do it, I want to do it cleanly and discreetly. Like
It
whatever
could actually
accident.
seem like an accident. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and my idea, like I had mentioned to you before, was there was a road called Old Mill Road, not that far from where I was raised for most of my life, and I knew the bridge, I knew how old it was. Structurally, it was completely out of whack. It was not sound at all.
Right.
Um, it's not fit for anything heavy, obviously, and I knew that I could take my truck, drive across it, and the beauty of it was there's a straightaway right to it, and it wouldn't have took much of anything to hit the bridge, go off the side. After it was a nice heavy rain, so the creek was up to at least 20 foot. It would just drag me away, and that would be it. And then the alternative was, I'd do the same thing at the Ohio River on the bridge that goes from, my hometown to the town across the river from us. I just
Yeah.
hard right, see you later, bye, and that's it. And they wouldn't
Yeah.
find me, and that was my thought process. It was like almost comforting. It was like
Yeah.
I could do this. I have to wait for the right time. And I, to this day, I don't know if me saying I have to wait for the right time was me kind of like backing out in a sense because of my daughter, but it was still in my head like the option's there. You just have to wait for the right time and the right
Yeah.
circumstances.
It
And
feels like a security blanket in a way, and
yeah,
we're not saying this to glorify it. There's nothing
there's
glorifying about
nothing.
it. It's
Yeah,
demonic. It's awful. It's a terrible thing. But for people that don't understand or have never experienced it, um, it's important that they understand, or even for people that have experienced it, and maybe this will be in some way comforting to them, that their person that executed wasn't doing it out of cruelty to them. It is a very dysfunctional, very desperate, very sad place for that person. But in that moment, it feels like the only area, the only thing of comfort, the only thing that they can control.
yeah,
It's not the right answer. It's never the right
no,
answer. It always does damage. But the thought process, and I think there will be some people watching that can relate, that maybe not understand. I don't know about you, but I know for me, it took Battleforge Nation and working in Battleforge Nation for me to even realize that I had been in that place. I did not, I can look back and identify it as
yeah.
clearly, but when I'm living in it, I wasn't living in a state of like, oh, I feel suicidal today. Like it wasn't, it just doesn't, as strange as it sounds, that's not
It's
how you're really thinking about it in the same way.
it's more of a backdoor thought. Like you unconsciously
Yeah.
think about it. It's there. It's rooted, and
Hmm.
your brain will feed on it. You might be completely in depth in a conversation like we are right now, but that seed is still back there, and it's still
Yeah.
growing and manifesting, and it's scary. And I was the same boat you were. Like 2016, leading into late fall of 2016, BFN popped up, and knowing the structure base and the people involved in it, it was my unit. It was home. I knew it, so I jumped for it. I jumped at it and head first. And I worked with these guys day in and day out on cases, and I started seeing myself in almost every single one of these cases because I had
Yeah.
been there. Either the broken home, the survivor's guilt, the you know all those things, and I saw myself in this stuff, and I'm like, holy shit, I had a problem. I had a severe freaking problem, and I was that close, you know, and it was an eye opener, like severely. And like at that point in time, I had just met my wife, and I stepped back from BFN for a little bit, and I broke everything down to her. And I was like, for you to fully understand me, you need to fully understand where I come from. And this has nothing to do with my upbringing or any of that, even though that has some relevance on who I am today because I dealt with some
Sure.
pretty fucked up stuff as a kid beyond what normal people would consider normal. My upbringing was very rough. It was very strict, it was very controlled, and it was very manipulated. Um, and the premise of that was drug abuse on my parents' part. I didn't know this until, my later years in life, but
Yeah.
leading into that, I had to explain this stuff to her and get her to understand, like, this is who I am. This is what I have been dealing with for nearly a decade. It's festered and manifested, and I have my moments. I will snap, and it takes a lot to bring me back, but it also takes a lot to get me to that point. I said, but I can get to that point within a snap of a second. And she was kind of understanding and aware. For her, it was an eye-opening experience, but now she understands that it's more because I'm protective, not because I'm being an asshole. And and for me, I'm kind of glad that she sees it, but it's a worry in my head, like, when's the next time I'm going to snap? Why am I going to snap? But she understands it's under the guidelines of, it's not me, you know, trying to snap to be in that, crazy state of mind. I get into that protective mode. That's how I am. And
So I
it,
think with that, it's, you've had all of these things that you had to overcome, but that didn't just happen. It didn't just miraculously happen, and you don't have this awareness by
yeah,
miracle. We wish that we'd had somebody ask us. We don't expect people to be mind readers, but now that we've been on the flip side and working with people that are suicidal, and being able to look back and quantify and understand how bad off we were,
yeah,
if we could go back and tell that person, that version of ourselves, something different and what we could do differently. One, we wish that somebody had asked us, not the VA, but someone that knows us,
yeah.
are you having suicidal thoughts? And what a relief that would have been to help us probably get enough footing to really understand, like, oh man, I really am.
The
And
severity.
then how do you work through that? And so, you get through all of these spaces. You've had to develop some hobbies, you've had to develop routine mental health stuff, and you've had to equip your family that some of your snapping, um, how do they navigate that, and how should they navigate that? Not that you want your kids or your family to,
Yeah,
walk on eggshells, but to understand, one, that you're human, and two, that this stuff doesn't come from nowhere. You've been through some very, very real things. That stuff doesn't,
yeah,
the scars may heal. And
yeah,
part of what we're here for too is so tools, yes, and then
yeah,
we're going to extract some shrapnel and
yeah.
let some things heal. So why don't you talk through what some of those tools are that you learned from your circumstances?
So for me, I started developing patterns of kind of just routine patterns, and then building on those patterns of, involving myself into different things, be it BFN, or, woodworking out of my garage, or working on cars, just,
Mhm.
ev- you know, breaking that mundane cycle of everyday monotony, and, just doing things on a whim, just getting out, free adventuring, just getting out there to, expose yourself to peace of mind without overloading yourself with stresses. And so for me, like I said, I started out with, you know, buying my house that I have now. And then from there, it was like, okay, that's one goal. That's one obstacle that I've accomplished. Now it's time to move to the next thing. How am I going to occupy my time once I get this house livable? House was livable within 90 days. Just a little bit of paint here and there, and that's all it needed. Thank God. But then it was a matter of, okay, well, I can do with this with wood. I know how to do this. I can do these things. I invested into a laser engraver to, learn and occupy my time in that fashion, as well as, opening a garage out of my own personal garage to work on other people's stuff at a discounted rate, severely more than what garages charge these days, because it's crazy. Um, so I've slowly reinvested myself into, multiple platforms of things to keep myself occupied. That way I'm not, just sitting here day in and day out, like, well, what am I going to do now? What am I going to do now? Because
Yeah.
then you start taking back into um that realm of the thought processes.
Yeah, you get
You don't.
stuck in those head cycles and those head patterns. So you stop the drinking, You found healthy outlets for yourself to focus your brain on other things
Yeah.
that are enjoyable to you. But even outside of that, I mean, that can still get isolating. So far and beyond that, you made sure to get a network. So you're
Yeah.
reconnecting with your brothers and with your family, and I'm talking the military family.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and not just to commiserate over things, but to just know that, like, even if we just sat in the same room together, you get me.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
to
yeah. Definitely.
feel to feel understood in that
Yeah.
way. I mean, like we talked in the beginning, there are so many things that people have that we like to dismiss one another because of how we're different. There's a lot of stuff that we have in common,
Yeah.
and we're not made, I don't care who you are and how independent you are or any of these things, we are not meant to do this life alone. We're
Yeah.
not. Isolation is deadly. And
Yeah.
then beyond that, so part of what we've discovered through this process, and kind of why you reached out to me, was you realized that telling your story was going to be healing for you, but then you want to use your voice for something else. Your voice has been
Yeah.
associated with some big wins, but with some hard,
Yeah.
heavy things. And
Yeah.
so telling your story so that you can, we can't grieve things that we're not honest about,
Yeah.
and we can't heal from things that we have not been honest about, and getting that out and putting it on the table and saying, this is me, this is who I am,
Yeah.
to really address our past head on so that it doesn't haunt us, to do the surgery so you can get that ugly stuff out so then it can heal properly. The scar may always be there, but it's not the same. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to hurt. You've carried a
Yeah.
very heavy load for
Yeah.
like a decade.
Yeah. And the biggest thing with all of it, it boils down to, being over there, and you're following that strict protocol of orders, 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 orders. And you, in the back of your head, you're talking to these guys getting hurt, getting banged up, and things of that nature. And you feel tremendously responsible, even though it's not directly your fault. The words are coming out of your mouth. You're telling them what to do,
Yeah.
in a sense, and you feel tremendously like I do, and I did up until now, just being able to get it out and expressing it, like I felt so responsible for everything, regardless if it was positive or negative. I felt responsible for it, and there was a lot more negative than positive in that sense because I dealt with a lot of negative stuff.
Yeah.
And we said before, my perspective is not the same as somebody else's perspective. This is just my personal point of view on my time while I was in. It has no reflection on anybody that I served with, above me or below me. It's
This
irrelevant
is your
beyond that.
story. Yeah.
Exactly. And for me, it's just to say I'm sorry. To every guy that I ever served with, that ever heard me on the radio, to ever talk to me, converse with me, to understand that it was nothing that I could do, and I profusely. I couldn't say it enough that I apologize. And that's my biggest part of it. Is just getting that sorry out there. If somebody says thank you, so be it. Great. I'm glad. And if somebody else is like, oh, you're shit full of shit, or this or this or this or whatever, that's your perspective. You're entitled to it. God bless you. I'm not going to knock you. I have no reason to.
Yeah.
Um,
That's their story.
yeah,
Yep. But
and
your part
and
in it is, to make sure that your voice is heard on the other side
yeah,
as Randall, not as the radio operator, but
yeah,
as you, and that you were in the fight with them and you wanted the best for everybody, but that's a heavy, heavy weight to carry.
yeah.
And for them to hear you on that, it's very cathartic. Mhm. And for your
It's
kids, you want to be able to, for who you were to who you are to who you're gonna be, and to make sure
yeah,
that you've got a clean slate, and that you've done the work to be able to do the healing so that your kids can maybe look back one day and see your humanity, through a very healthy perspective, when the
yeah.
time's right.
And my biggest thing with that would be that you know going into to being in the service, it's not a light choice. It's not a light decision. It's not an easy decision. It's a very, very uh, responsible thing to do at somebody of that age. Um, and to just throw caution to the wind and go head first into something like that, knowing you sign that dotted line, be into your death if need be, and then coming out and getting away from it, and then dealing with the aftermath and dealing with the stresses, the anxieties, the depression, the PTSD, all of it, taking its toll and then working through that, and just hoping that somewhere in that spectrum of everything that's went on in my life, to show my children that I have a shred of humanity. I'm not a robot. I'm not this mean, vicious person, or you know what have you. I want them to see me as me, not as what I went through my past. My past doesn't define me. My future does, and that's what I want them to see, is that their future is no different than mine. You dictate your choices. As you dictate your choices in life, be it positive or negative, there's always a recourse to it. And I've taught my son that every action has a positive or negative reaction, and you live your life by your choice and your word.
Mhm.
And I just want them to see me as, like I said, me, as human as possible, and not this, like I said, crazed monster that's
Right.
you know
This fierce
been
protector. Yeah.
yeah.
That comes from
And
somewhere.
that, a lot of it was embedded into me growing up with my grandfather, and he always told me, your word is your bond, and that stuck with me to this day, and I swear by it, and I tell everybody that I meet the first time I meet them, I give you the benefit of the doubt. If you twist it, you're done. I won't trust you, and you will not be in my life. And I've lost a lot of people because of it, and that's no disregard to me. It's on them. They take that fate into their own hands,
Yeah.
you know. And that's, like I said, I've taught my son to live that way. My brothers teach his sons the same thing. You give a man your word, you stick by it,
Yep.
and that's all, because that's all we have in the end is our own word.
So you've also kind of tying this into, why we're here, and even why I'm doing this, and I see so much value in it, is, you've taken responsibility for so many things. Some of it that things that you carry, and this is because of your work ethic and who you are as a person. You carried even more than you needed to, but for your mistakes and your flaws, you have owned them, and you have not made excuses for them. And because of that, like my logo, this is something my team kind of came up with as they got to know my story, is that, an arrow propels forward by being pulled back first.
Yeah,
And sometimes our things that feel like failures or feel like um, mistakes that we've made or hardships, if we flip the script on it, and if we learn from it, and if we take responsibility for it, we control what we can, and we let go of the things that we can't, and we operate in a place of grace that the people around us are human too. Um,
yeah,
that we can go through life and use, no matter what, everything can be a learning opportunity. And as long as we're making new mistakes, that's kind of my motto. For me, I don't love making mistakes, but damn, if I'm making the same mistake, that's the problem. As long as I'm making a new mistake,
yeah,
okay, I can give myself some grace for that. And that might be the thing that propels me forward, that helps me to move forward and be better the next time, and to relate to the person to my left and to my right, because I see their humanity and I can relate, and I have a lot of grace, and I'm not going to get self-righteous because I
yeah,
made a lot of my own
yeah.
mistakes. So I think your kids are going to see that, and I think you've operated with a great deal of integrity, and how you've tried to handle some wars, not pretty, um,
Yeah.
but you've carried it long and hard. You've given back. That giving back process has really helped you heal. And so,
Tremendously. It's been a weight lifted, honestly.
mhm,
It's something, and I have some communication with some of the guys that I served with, dealing with the things that I've dealt with from the time I stepped into my unit to the time I stepped out of my unit, and up till now. You know, it was, literally the elephant sitting on my chest, and it's elation that it's finally, just being lifted. And it's so, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just, it's so uplifting because I just feel like this stress that I've carried for so long, it's just been, you know, dissolved, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I don't have to stress on it as much. I mean, is it going to be there? Yeah, it's going to be there, but it's not going to be nearly as bad as it was.
Yeah. Carrying these things alone, it gets awfully heavy.
Yeah,
And it can get corrosive when you're just keeping it in. Purging in a healthy way, purging in a safe space, with people that where you feel understood, and people that can listen without, there's no rebuttal here to this. This is
yeah,
your story.
yeah,
This is your story. That's it. And that's something that people need to learn, and I want people to learn from these things, is to learn to listen to people. For nothing else, it might be for their own healing, but also it might help you to get a
yeah,
different perspective on life and to appreciate and respect people next to you, not just to listen for the sake of having an argument back to them. We've got two
yeah,
ears and one mouth for a reason, and we need to learn to operate that way. But I think this is a super healthy thing for you to do. It's been an act of self-forgiveness, an act of self-love, and
yeah.
and our stories are important. Our stories matter, and that's what I'm trying to use Amy Hines Real Talk for nothing else than our own healing process. Sometimes getting it out on paper and being able to sort it out, or capturing it in a way where it's not just bouncing around in your head.
Yeah.
Pinning it down, where you're like, okay, this was real and this is okay, and I can be honest about it, and I can grieve it, and I can do the surgery, and I can heal. And so the
And,
shrapnel's out, my friend.
and that was my thought process, watching Mason's story and then, watching your story and then getting into my own head, trying to figure out, it's like you have, like I had the concept in my head of how I wanted to get it out, but I couldn't, you know, get it to fruition. And that was the biggest reason coming to you was the best alternative option that I could come up with, because I knew that coming to you, one, you're going to understand. Two, you're not going to judge me, you know,
No,
for
no,
for anything.
no.
And then three, working with each other within BFN, we kind of had,
We developed that rapport.
yeah. So it wasn't like I didn't know you, and I had the opportunity to come forth, and that's when I contacted you. And you to me were the best solution to a very, very big problem within my life, and it helped me, get that pressure and pain and anguish off my chest, so I could breathe again, and I can truly feel it.
That's great. Yeah, one of the things you said to me was, I feel like I need to tell my story, but I don't know where to start. And I'm like,
Yeah,
I got you, man. We can absolutely do that. I can help you with that because I've been there. And starting is the hardest part, but we got to do it.
yeah.
Dude, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. Good job.
Thank you,
It's
thank you.
great.